Jason Statham has defeated the world's worst criminals, but there's one man he's never been able to beat. Years ago, in a secret tournament, he was brutally defeated and never spoke of it again. Now, the past has come back to bite him. But this rematch will reveal a secret no one expected. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a fight. It's the most personal reckoning of Jason's career. It was past midnight in downtown Chicago. The streets were wet from a light rain, reflecting the orange glow of the traffic lights that swung lazily in the wind. Most of the city slept, but not him. Jason Statham sat alone inside an old diner on Roosevelt Avenue. The place hadn't changed in decades. Red vinyl booths, flickering neon signs, the hum of a jukebox playing a forgotten Johnny Cash tune. Outside, his reflection stared back from the rain-soaked window, haunted and still. In his hand, a photograph, creased, faded. Two men in military gear. One of them was Jason. The other was the only man he had never beaten. A man they used to call Reaper. Years ago, in an underground fighting tournament buried beneath the Nevada desert, Jason faced him. That night, for the first and only time, he didn't just lose. He was broken, physically, mentally, spiritually. He never spoke of it again. Until now. Tonight he received a message. No sender. Just 4 words typed in bold. He's back, one night. Jason looked at the photo again, then slipped it into his jacket. He stood up, dropped some cash on the counter, and walked out into the cold. This wasn't about pride, it wasn't about revenge. It was unfinished business. Jason Statham had always been known as the man who never backed down, the man who turned pain into precision, who made silence his most dangerous weapon. But buried deep within him was a memory, one that refused to fade. A fight, a name, a night that rewrote his limits and planted a seed of doubt where there once was none. It happened 12 years ago in a forgotten corner of the Nevada desert, in a blood-soaked arena hidden beneath an abandoned casino, a place called the Pit. It wasn't just a fight club. It was a battlefield for ghosts. Men came from all over the world, not for glory, but for something darker. And that night, Jason had entered like he always did. Confident, controlled, untouchable, but that's when he met him. A man they called Kane. Not much was known about him. No birth records, no military file, no trace online. But everyone who stepped in the cage with Kane walked out different, if they walked out at all. He fought with no expression, no hesitation. His strikes were like thunder, but his eyes were colder than death. That night, Jason fought like never before, and still he lost. Not just the fight, but something deeper. Kane didn't just beat him, he broke him, left him with cracked ribs, fractured pride, and a silence that echoed in his bones for years. Jason never spoke of that night again. But in the dark corners of his mind, the name lingered. Kane. The only man who ever made him doubt himself. Now, 12 years later, that name had resurfaced. Not by chance, but by design. A whisper from an informant. A symbol left on the windshield of his car. The emblem of the Pit. Carved like a warning, or an invitation. Jason sat in a booth of a roadside diner off I-15, staring at the folded napkin in front of him. The waitress had no idea she had just handed him more than coffee. Scribbled in black ink were 3 words. One more round. He didn't flinch. He stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked out into the night. The engine of his black Charger roared to life, and with it, something inside him reawakened. He wasn't chasing revenge. He wasn't chasing pride. He was chasing the ghost he never buried. The desert welcomed him back like an old enemy. Dry, cracked, unforgiving. The road narrowed until it disappeared into dust, and the sky bled orange behind him as twilight fell. Jason didn't need directions. His mind remembered every twist, every silence, every shadow. Muscle memory guided the wheel more than thought. The Pit was never on a map. It existed outside time, buried beneath years of forgotten violence and men who preferred their sins in the dark. He arrived just before midnight. The abandoned casino still stood, half swallowed by sand, its neon lights long dead, but the blood beneath still fresh in memory. Jason parked the Charger and stepped out, the heat clinging to his skin like sweat before a storm. He crossed the threshold slowly, boots crunching broken glass, the scent of rust and old adrenaline heavy in the air. Down below, the structure came alive. Voices echoed through concrete tunnels, not many. The pit was never about crowds, just the right eyes. A place where men with too much money watched men with too much pain. There was no ceremony, no music, just the sound of fists meeting flesh and the occasional scream swallowed by the cage. Jason passed them all, the gamblers, the fixers, the old fighters who remembered him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. His presence said enough. He descended the metal stairs to the cage level, heart steady, breath low. There, in the center of the arena, stood the circle of rusted steel that had nearly become his grave all those years ago. And beyond it was the chair, empty. For now. Jason took a seat at the edge of the cage, resting his forearms on his knees. He didn't pace. He didn't warm up. His fight wasn't with nerves. It was with memory. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the cage door opened. The crowd, few as they were, shifted. Jason stood, eyes locked ahead. And there he was. Kane. The years hadn't touched him. If anything, they made him colder. His frame was still carved from stone, eyes still lifeless. He stepped into the cage like a man stepping into his own grave, with no fear, no questions, just inevitability. There were no introductions, no referee, only silence. And then the bell. Jason moved first, fast, sharp, a low jab to measure distance. Kane didn't react, not even a blink. Jason circled, his breath slowed. This wasn't a fight for spectators. It was a war for something deeper. Pride, closure, redemption. Every step echoed the ghost of their last encounter. Kane struck first. Not a punch, a feint, enough to test Jason's reflexes. Jason dodged, countered, clipped Kane's jaw. No reaction, just recalibration. Then the real blows began. Elbows, knees, kicks traded like debts. Both men absorbing, adapting. Blood flowed, not from panic but from price. Each cut a reminder. This wasn't a fight for glory. It was a confession written in bruises and breath. Jason staggered. A rib cracked. Kane pressed. But Jason didn't fall. He never did. Not again. Jason felt the blood trickle down the side of his face. Hot as the desert outside, but thicker. Heavier. He took a half step back, just enough to breathe. Not out of fear, but calculation. The sound of the crowd was barely audible now. Just heartbeats. Breathing. The sound of flesh being pressed beyond its limit. Kane was still. As if nothing had hit him. As if all those years had never passed. As if he had been frozen in time. At the very moment he had first defeated Jason. But Jason was no longer that man. The blow came from above, a brutal elbow marked with military precision. Jason blocked it with his forearm, feeling his bones creak. The impact staggered him, but he spun in the same motion, going for Kane's side. A kick, quick and firm, connected with his abdomen. Kane backed up an inch. That was all. But it was enough. Jason lunged forward. 2 short punches to the chest, an uppercut. Kane absorbed it all like a wall. Then he countered with a hook that tore through the air and crashed into Jason's jaw with enough force to knock most men out. Jason fell. Not in slow motion, but in silence. The world spun around him, the lights in the warehouse flickering like distant memories. He hit the ground with a dull thud. It wasn't the pain that shocked him. It was the repetition. The familiar feeling of being there. Again. On the ground. Below him, blood mixed with dust. Above him, Kane's figure looming. Just like before, but something changed. Jason opened his eyes and saw beyond Kane. He saw what he had never seen the first time. The emptiness in the man's eyes. It wasn't hate. It wasn't anger. It was surrender. Kane wasn't here to win. He was here because he didn't know how to do anything else. because violence was the only language he had left. Jason smiled, a broken smile but a knowing one. He didn't stand up out of pride. He stood up because he finally understood. This wasn't a duel between men anymore. It was between ghosts. With his muscles throbbing, Jason used the corner of the ring to pull himself up. Every inch hurt, every memory pressed against his chest. But he stood up, again. And when he saw it, Kane hesitated. Just for a second, but that second was enough to turn the tide. Because now Jason wasn't fighting to beat Kane. He was fighting to close something inside himself. Jason's breath was ragged now, not from exhaustion, but from memory. Every step he took toward Kane was like walking through echoes of a younger version of himself, a version who thought strength was just muscle and speed. But this time, he had something more dangerous than fists. Clarity. Kane lunged again, a low kick followed by a brutal elbow meant to shatter ribs. Jason moved differently now, not just with instinct, but with experience. He sidestepped the attack, spun behind Kane, and drove his forearm into the man's back, sending him staggering forward. The crowd roared, but Jason didn't hear it. All he saw was the man who once humiliated him, now faltering. Kane turned, eyes burning, not with anger, but with confusion. He had expected the same Jason from years ago, the one who relied on aggression, on rage. But now, Jason was calm, surgical, controlled. And that made him more dangerous than ever. Blow after blow, they exchanged more than pain. They exchanged history. Kane fought like a man who had nothing left. Jason fought like a man who had nothing to prove. Until suddenly, Kane slipped. One misstep. Jason seized it, a spinning back fist to the temple. Kane dropped to one knee. And in that moment, Jason hesitated. Not because he couldn't finish it, but because he saw something terrifying in Kane's face. Not fear, relief. Kane wasn't trying to win. He wanted to lose. Jason stepped back. Everything around him faded. The noise, the lights, the pulse of the crowding. And what remained was a memory. A photograph. A younger Kane standing beside a military truck. And behind him, Jason. Brothers once. Warriors cut from the same stone. Kane had disappeared after the last mission. Rumors said he was dead. But the truth was worse. He had been discarded, forgotten by the system that built him. And now, this fight was not about rivalry. It was a final cry from a man who had no other way to say he was lost. Jason's fists lowered. The referee didn't move. The crowd waited, confused. Kane, still kneeling, looked up. And for the first time, his expression wasn't cold. It was human. Jason extended his hand. Kane stared at it, then took it. The silence in the warehouse was deafening, because everyone expected a war. But what they got was redemption. Jason turned to the crowd, bloodied but unbroken, and walked away from the ring. The fight was over. Not because one man had won, but because both men had finally stopped losing. Outside the arena, the night was cold. The kind of cold that seeps through the cracks in old pavement and into old bones. Jason walked in silence, blood drying on his knuckles, sweat cooling on his back. He didn't need cheers. He didn't need closure. What he needed was distance. The streets were quiet now. Back alleys still wet from the rain. Neon signs buzzing over closed diners and rusted gas stations. He passed an old payphone. Out of habit, he paused. He used to call his father from phones like that, after every fight, every win. But the number didn't exist anymore. Neither did the voice on the other end. Jason slipped his hands into his coat pockets and kept walking. There were no cameras now, no crowd, just footsteps echoing under dim streetlights. And yet, something pulled at him. He turned a corner into a small, forgotten park, the kind of place kids used to play before the city stopped caring. He sat on a cold bench beneath a leafless tree. Across from him, a cracked statue of a soldier saluting stared into nothingness. Another ghost. Jason stared back. He wasn't thinking about Kane anymore, or the fight, or the crowd that had come hoping to see blood. He was thinking about the boy he used to be, the one who thought strength meant never backing down, the one who believed pain was the price of survival. But tonight had taught him something different. Sometimes the real victory is knowing when not to finish the fight. The wind picked up. A plastic bag drifted past like a memory trying to find its way home. Jason pulled something from his coat pocket, the same photo he'd seen years ago. Him and Kane side by side before the war, before the betrayal, before everything turned black and white. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, he folded it and placed it on the bench beside him. A quiet offering to the past. He stood up, walked back into the night, and never looked back. The warehouse was empty now. The ring had been taken down, the blood washed away. But in the silence that lingered, something remained. A story, not of violence, but of transformation. Of two warriors. One who was lost, and one who came looking for vengeance, but found something else instead. Something deeper than revenge. Something heavier than victory. Peace. The kind that doesn't come with glory or gold, but with the quiet realization that sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is let go. In the end, it wasn't about strength, it wasn't about winning. It was about accepting that some scars never fade, and that sometimes the greatest opponent we face is our own story. In the end, it wasn't about strength. Jason didn't walk away victorious. He walked away transformed, and this fight, more than any other, showed the world that even the toughest men carry ghosts that can't be punched away. Now it's your turn. It wasn't about winning. It was about accepting that some scars never fade, and that sometimes the greatest opponent we face is our own story. Jason didn't walk away victorious. He walked away transformed. And this fight, more than any other, showed the world that even the toughest men carry ghosts that can't be punched away. Now it's your turn. Have you ever seen a story like this? Drop a comment below. I want to hear what you think. If this journey kept you hooked, hit the like button so YouTube knows this is the kind of content you enjoy. And of course, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell because the next stories will hit even harder. See you in the next fight.